Okay, so the history of art starts with the history of people. So, very briefly, we should mention the fact that there is prehistoric art, and prehistoric art is mesmerizing and amazing. So, we're talking about paintings and drawings on caves, right? Cave walls, mostly of humans and animals, paintings that are very iconic and expressive. When I use the word iconic, I mean if it's a drawing of a deer or of a buffalo, it symbolizes that deer, but it doesn't look like the deer, right? It's almost an icon is like the old word for something that maybe today we would think of an emoji, right? So when I say iconic, I mean it stands in for that thing, but it doesn't necessarily look like that thing. It doesn't have an illusionistic component. It has a signification component, right? So it's iconic, it's expressive, it's gestural, and the impact of this kind of tradition is basically what makes us people has become ingrained, like art has become ingrained into what makes us different from other animals. We've been starting to make a tradition of beautification of important sites like our homes, right? And a tradition of visual commemoration, like, hey, we went there, we hunted this mammoth, let's tell everybody about it. We can tell it in the form of a visual story that is captured on the wall of a cave, and a tradition of visual expression. People want to express stuff visually. That started in the deep, deep past and tens of thousands of years ago. And all those things are still with us today. So, all those artistic impacts we are attributing to prehistoric art. All right. So, after prehistoric art, we move along and we get to ancient art. Ancient art, we have wonderful examples of ancient art all over the world, and they're very, very different from each other. So, if I'm talking about Egyptian art and I'm talking about ancient Indian art or ancient Japanese art, they're going to look very, very different. So, not a lot that ties all these ancient arts together. It's not like an art movement, which is why this is very, very difficult to describe in one slide. But some common themes do exist, right? So, the primary subject, pretty much similar across all these cultures. We're talking mythological imagery, historical scenes, and notable figures. Hey, that guy's important. What do we call him? Here we call him Pharaoh. In another context, we call him something else. They're important. These people usually do get depicted in ancient art in the various areas. And the visual markers are also pretty similar. We're talking about iconic. Again, this thing doesn't necessarily look like Pharaoh, but it is Pharaoh, right? Or it is Anubis or whoever it is that we're describing. Non-illusionistic, but symbolizes and looks enough like what we're trying to express that it's coherent, right? Decorative, very beautiful, and finely crafted. So this is influenced by all the stuff that happened before, namely prehistoric art and technological advancements across multiple fields. So we used to be limited to just kind of rubbing charcoal on the walls of caves, right? But then we have technological advancements of more sophisticated paint. Some cultures at this point already have tempera paint, which is paint that is based in egg yolk, right? Which is a hardening agent. Or the ancient Egyptians had encaustic, which they were mixing pigments with wax, right? Basically painting almost with candle wax, and they arrived at really, really impressive effects with that. And in the world of sculpture, we're getting good at mathematics, so we can build bigger things, more ambitious things. We have carving tools. These technological advancements were huge for advancing ancient art. And as far as the impact goes, as we said, advancement of fine craftsmanship and establishment of artistic professions. So in ancient Egypt, for example, if you were an artist, it was a recognized thing, right? You could be a warrior, you could be an artist, you could be a whatever else that you could be. But this is something that is important because the role of an artist, what it means to be an artist, is something that changes a lot throughout history. So it's important to note that it started in ancient times, where you could point to a person and say, oh, what does that dude do? What's his name? Ken? What does he do? Oh, he's an artist. This idea of artist as profession starts then, and the art becomes central to worshiping practices, This is kind of part of what we were talking about before, that art becomes very important when it comes to beautifying important sites, right? So sites of worship, sites of the gods become very significant. And how do we make sure that significant arenas are symbolized as being significant? Well, we adorn them. We adorn them with beautiful objects. So we need sculptures, we need visual imagery, and those kinds of objects became the job of artists, producing these objects that become very important for worship and also, of course, in ancient Egypt, burial, things like that. And last impact is that art becomes a marker of progress, strength, and stability. So on the political side of things, think about a city that tries to signify, I'm an important city, right? What do you expect them to do? How are they going to display their strength and their wealth? They're going to use art because it shows, kind of like the peacock, right? The peacock shows that it has an evolutionary advantage. You know, it's so strong with its resources that it can afford to carry that big tail that glitters in the sun. A city that is strong and durable and wealthy wants to have sculptures and art kind of all over the place because it shows that it has extra money, right? Extra money and extra time to spend on beauty. So it becomes a cultural marker for strength, stability, and wealth. And this started then and is still totally a thing now. So important to note that. And we move forward. Bada boom, classical Greek and Roman art. Oh, very important.
Pardon the interruption. Hope you're enjoying this video. And if you are, please take a moment to like it and to subscribe to my channel to make sure you don't miss any of my upcoming cool stuff. And if you want to support my mission of making art education affordable and accessible, please consider joining my Patreon through the link in the description below. You'll have access to live lessons, full recorded workshops, Q&As, and much, much more. And you can sign up today for as little as $2. Thanks in advance for the support. Now back to the action.
Okay, so this is technically still part of the ancient art. You can see in the years, it's still within the previous time period. But I wanted to make a separate slide for this artistic movement because it becomes extremely significant to the development of Western painting. This is a period that people will continuously look at and either draw inspiration from or fight against, right? This becomes a kind of important point of reference for many, many future artists. So these ancient Greeks and Romans were primarily influenced by philosophy. Ancient Greece, as some of you may know, was kind of a miraculous place when it came to the intellectual advancements that they made, both in philosophy, science, mathematics, anatomy. These people were nerds in the best sense of the word, right? They were just looking at everything around them and trying to formulate coherent thoughts in order to explain the world and improve the world. So as part of their rigorous intellectual activity, they developed a philosophy of aesthetics, a philosophy of logics, a philosophy of ethics. And to us, these things, you know, they just sound totally mundane. Like when I say, hey, you know, use logic to solve this problem. You think I'm saying that and it just makes perfect sense to you. You're almost going to be offended. What do you mean I don't use logic? That's an offensive thing to say. Well, it wasn't an offensive thing to say back then, right? Because in the ancient world, people are led by other kinds of intuitions and other kinds of instincts. There was a lot of room for intuition and emotion in the ancient world. And then come the ancient Greeks and they say, no, logic, ethics, aesthetics, these are things that we can canonize, that we can formulate. And books were written about all of these ideas, and they became extremely significant to artists. Most importantly, you know, anatomy. So these artists were excellent at anatomy. They studied the human figure, they studied bodies. So they knew what's going on there. They were very, very versed in mathematics and were interested in canonizing idealized proportions that make a figure beautiful. Now, this idea of beauty was very, very different in the ancient world from what we know of today. Back then, when you read the writings of Plato, for example, beauty is one of the main virtues, right? What does it mean to be a good person? Oh, it means helping those in need. Oh, and it also means producing beauty when you can. I know, weird concept, right? Something that I might argue for, but it was an idea that when you are surrounded by beauty, your mind is free to think about the more important things. It elevates the human spirit. If you are walking around an area and you're surrounded by ugly stuff, you're constantly bombarded by distractions. So the beauty and harmony was something that the Greeks looked at as a very important virtue. So they were trying to use math and use design in order to produce beauty all around them. And that was considered ethical, right? So try to put yourself in a situation where making something beautiful is an ethics practice. So very unusual and very significant, and created vast amount of beauty. That art period, because of these philosophical principles, was just they created so much majestic art that you'll see later on how it influenced basically everything. And I didn't talk about visual markers. So idealized, harmonious, balanced, stoic. Stoic, which basically advocates for restraint and self-control, right? So it's like it's almost the opposite of acting on your passions. It's not, oh, I feel angry, boom, I'm gonna go get in a fight, right? No, it's take a breath, be measured, be restrained, have self-control. So stoic is a visual characteristics that a lot of art movements that become inspired by the style of the ancient Greeks, they adopt this stoicism visually, right? Any other important so in terms of more artistic impact, the invention of contrapposto. Kind of difficult to imagine a world without contrapposto, but it basically just adds a dynamic element on top of something that is symmetrical. So if you have a symmetrical element, like for example, the human body, right? If you just stand stiff like this, both arms symmetrical, both legs symmetrical, then you're going to get something that's not very dynamic, doesn't feel like it has movement, doesn't feel like it has life. And then the Greeks gradually discovered that, oh, if I put one hand up and one hand down and one shoulder up and one shoulder down, and then the opposite is happening with my pelvis, right? And one leg is up and one leg is down. So they take these symmetrical parts of the human body and try to make them contrast in the way that they move. So symmetrical anatomy, but asymmetrical movement creates a very, very pleasant object to look at. So this is a major advancement in the understanding of aesthetics and understanding what makes it fun to look at things. And yeah, that is going to carry over into the distant future.